looking back on this situation, knowing what I know now, yeah, I definitely would have done things a little differently. Hey there folks, welcome to the channel. I'm glad you could make it because in today's episode, I'm going to take you on a journey that's been 4 months in the making on what I had to do to personally fix my broken Harvest-Right freeze dryer. And I know that this particular topic can seem a little sensitive depending on what your experience is with your freeze dryer or with Harvest-Right. So before you blow up the comment section, watch this video to the very end because the information might surprise you. All right, in order to fully understand what we had to do, I'm going to take you all the way back to the very beginning. Unfortunately, I didn't film the first few things for this process, but I'll be able to explain it, and it's really not that big a deal. I started filming about midway through when I thought, wow, this is actually going to be very interesting. It might possibly help somebody. With that being said, I want to kind of put a disclaimer out there, and that I'm not suggesting or recommending that you do any of the things that I did in this video if you're having a problem with your freeze dryer, and it really doesn't matter the manufacturer. My advice, if you are having a problem, would be to first contact the manufacturer and see what they have to say about it. And then if you do end up having work done on your freeze dryer, make sure you have it done by a licensed professional. All right, now that that is out of the way, let's get started. My large Harvest-Right freeze dryer was delivered to me in April of 2023, and by August of 2023, so a little less than 4 months, it had stopped working. And what I noticed was that during a cycle where we were doing blueberries, only half of the chamber would freeze up during the freezing cycle. Now, if you have a freeze dryer, you know that that entire chamber is supposed to get icy, frosty, but in this one particular cycle, only half of it did. I didn't pay much attention. I let the cycle complete, and the blueberries were a disaster. That's a whole different story. The very next batch we ran, it didn't get cold at all. And so my first thought was, perhaps there's a Freon leak. But let me say that I am absolutely no HVAC specialist, all right? But that was my first best guess as to what might be the problem. So I called Harvest-Right technical support. Now this is where things get interesting. If you own a Harvest-Right freeze dryer and you need help from their support team, you've got to go to the website, fill out a ticket, and schedule an appointment. When that appointment comes, Harvest-Right gives you a call. The gentleman that I did talk to was incredibly nice, but he was no technician. To me, he seemed more like someone who was there to answer phone calls and maybe give you like troubleshooting tips. But every time I asked him a technical question, he needed to talk to someone who had either more authority or more knowledge than he did about that particular question. So, be that as it may, we are now on our first phone call. I explained the problem, and my first troubleshooting tip was to update the firmware. Makes sense, my firmware was outdated. I didn't see how that would fix the leak or the freezing issue, but you know, I figured let's just kind of go through the process and see what happens. The problem that exists with Harvest-Right support team is that the moment you hang up that phone call, you've got to schedule another appointment. And depending on how busy they are, they generally don't happen the same day or even the same week, at least not for me. And so every time I had to schedule another appointment, it was a week later, all right? So basically, he would give me a troubleshooting tip, I would do it, and then a week later, we would talk again. I would follow up with him and let him know what happened, and then he would give me another troubleshooting tip. All right, so that's kind of how it works. I updated the firmware, and guess what? Of course, it didn't fix the freezing issue. 1 week later, we scheduled another call. We are now on to the next troubleshooting tip, where Harvest-Right asked me to get my heating and air conditioning guy out here to give the unit a full charge. Just fill it up with Freon and see what happens, because maybe, you never know, maybe it fixed itself, is what I was told. Like I said before, I am no heating and air conditioning specialist, and so maybe it did. I got my HVAC guy out here. He comes out, fills it up with Freon, and I want to say within about 4 weeks, it was empty again. So unfortunately, the freeze dryer did not fix itself, which I gotta be honest would be kind of a cool feature, but we are now on to the next troubleshooting tip, and that is to isolate the leak. I was told by Harvest-Right, or at least the people that he was asking, to utilize a device called a sniffer. Now, I didn't have a sniffer. My HVAC guy did not have a sniffer. He has said he has never needed one because they're not very reliable. And so I went on Amazon, I bought what I thought was a decent sniffer. and try to see if I can find a gas leak.
This is what a sniffer looks like, and when there's Freon on the pipes, a little alarm goes off and the whole thing goes completely crazy. This is what it sounds like when everything is normal, though. And so that steady beeping, that means everything is normal. When there is a leak, that beeping, goes completely crazy and it gets really loud and really fast. But as you can tell right here, no problem. Everything's good. The video we originally submitted to Harvestright was about 13 minutes.
And in the video, the sniffer detected no leaks on the high side. Remember, the high side is the only area we could really test. That's where all the pipes are visible. All the welds, the Schrader valve, all that stuff got tested, and everything was normal. The only side we couldn't test was the low side because it's covered in foam, a very difficult area to maintenance in the event that you have a problem, and perhaps Harvestright might want to reconsider the type of insulation they use, moving forward. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only person who's had this problem. The other suggestion, in addition to the sniffer, was to grab like a little squirt bottle with some sudsy water and spray it all over the pipes and see if there's any one particular area that looks like it's got Freon coming out of it where bubbles are being created. We did that and nothing happened. All right, so Harvestright saw the video. We scheduled our next appointment, and I got to tell you, by this time, we're like almost 6 weeks, 7 weeks into this process, and I feel like we have gotten absolutely nowhere. Incredibly frustrating dealing with their support system, but it is what it is. Maybe your experience might be a little bit different. The next troubleshooting tip was to isolate the high side from the low side and to pressurize the system. If there's a leak, there will be a change in pressure. If there is no leak, then the pressure won't change. Absolutely brilliant. I wish, though, they would have told me that first, because it would have saved me like 90 bucks in the purchase of a sniffer that I'll probably never use again. Now, my HVAC guy wanted to test for a leak while the system was under vacuum rather than under pressure, and I asked if that was an okay process, and they said, yeah, absolutely, no problem.
So if you're not currently familiar with how the freeze dryer, operates, you basically have two sides. The low side, which is called the evaporator, and then the high side, which is called the condenser. The evaporator side is what gets everything cold. That's what's under the foam. And the condenser side is all of these exposed pipes that you see right here. And so what we're basically doing is we're isolating the systems so that when we check and put the high side under vacuum, only the high side will be tested. And then we're going to do the exact same thing for the low side. And that's what's being done right now. We're adding a valve. We're closing off any potential areas that there could be leaks. We're testing them. And then, of course, we're going to go ahead and put the system under vacuum. And we're just going to simply hook up a vacuum pump to a manifold, which is what that is right there. And then we're just going to pull a vacuum on the system for several hours. It's at about 50 right now. We're going to let it run for maybe 2 or 3 more hours and then come back and take a peek at it. This is what it looks like a couple hours into, pulling a vacuum. And it looks like the number is somewhere around 65. We'll just call it 65 looking at those bottom numbers. I don't know what any of those numbers mean. And so we're going to use 65 as the benchmark. This is the final test. And there we go. That's kind of where we settled at. And this is actually the video that I sent to Harvestright. And so it looks like the number dropped from about 60 to about 35 after it was all said and done.
All right, there you have it. So in our mind, while we were doing this particular test, we saw a change in vacuum on the low side, and that let us know that there was a problem on the low side. I didn't even test the high side. I sent that video to Harvestright, and they said, well, maybe doing it under vacuum isn't the best way to do it. We really need you to put it under pressure. We need you to get some nitrogen and go ahead and pressurize it and see if the PSI changes while it's under pressure with nitrogen. And, at this point, I'm not entirely sure where we're going to go. I keep getting affirmation that no matter what happens, a positive result will come of it. So that's the phrase that I hear almost in every phone call. And so I'm optimistic. This is the first time I'm ever dealing with these guys when it comes to maintenance and machine. And so I was like, you know what? Let me pay my HVAC guy to come over again, fill it up with nitrogen, and see what happens. All right, so at this point, we're basically focusing on the low side because my technician, who has 50 years of experience has a pretty good feeling that that's where the leak is. But Harvestright keeps saying it is absolutely impossible. There is no way there could be a leak on the low side. And honestly, I feel like they're kind of obligated to say that. Otherwise, it may open a legal can of worms. So either way, we tested the low side, we pressurized it with nitrogen, and here are the results of that.
All right, nitrogen time. We're going to go ahead and pressurize the system. Remember, we're pressurizing the low side. This is the evaporator side because we think this is where the leak is coming from. And it looks like once we're done pressurizing it, we are at roughly 215. So look at the red section on the manifold. That's about 215, I guess, something like that. And we let it hang out for about 24 hours before I took another reading. And this is literally the video that I sent to Harvestright. All right, so here 24 hours later, and it went from 215 to what is that right there? 180 or something like that. Yeah, I'm going to say anyway, close to 180, between 175 and 180. And now 24 more hours have passed, and we're down to 175. Okay, so we went from 215 to 175 in 48 hours. Clearly, there is a problem with the low side.
All right, there you go. You saw it with your own eyes. The low side, under both a vacuum test and a pressure test, over a few days, displayed a change of pressure, what let us know, almost confirming that that's where the problem was. All right, so we got back on the phone with Harvestright. We're now 2 months into this process, and we showed them the video, right? All right, now one thing that was suggested to me by Harvestright is that perhaps the leak that I think is coming from the low side is actually coming from the manifold. That's the thing with the gauges that actually puts, the gas into the system. Or perhaps it's coming from the Schrader valve. And I thought, you know what, my guy's manifold is a little old. That may be the case. So I went out and personally bought my HVAC guy a brand new manifold, and that's what we're going to be using for this next test as we pressurize the system according to Harvestright's troubleshooting tips. And so they said we now need you to test the high side, which we've kind of avoided because we thought the leak was on the low side. So my guy was like, you know what, not a problem, and let's do it
in a way that definitively confirms whether or not the high side has a leak. So we pulled a vacuum on it and then pressurized the system and remove the fan and the motor and all those components, and then we dunk this baby in water. All right, now let me just say that I know that this is a fairly radical way to test for a leak. There are probably better ways that aren't nearly as dramatic, but I wanted to make a point, and I wanted Harvestright to see that we needed to stop focusing on the high side and start focusing on the low side, which is where we think the leak is. And trust me when I tell you that I really wish the leak would have been on the high side on this unit right here, because all the pipes are visible and it would have been incredibly easy to maintenance. It would have been easy to fix. Notice we have no bubbles coming from the compressor. That's the black thing. None of the pipes are bubbling. After about, I don't know, several hours, I guess, we just let the bottom half stay in the water to see if any bubbles were coming from the weld points down there. And nope, it was 100% clean. And this test demonstrated without a shadow of a doubt that this high side, what we're looking at right here, did not have the leak. So here we go again.
All right, so at this point, we're starting to hear a slightly different tune from Harvestright. Maybe the low side has a leak. In theory, it's possible that there's a leak from the low side. And so they sent me 2 little video clips, kind of like a quick tutorial, and I mean quick, on how to check if the low side had a leak. Now, I am blown away at this by now because we have literally from the beginning have been saying the low side has a leak, and 2.5 months have passed. We're no closer to finding the leak than we were at the very beginning, and I'm probably now out $700, $800, $900, something like that in service calls and things that I've had to buy for this particular deal. But you know what? That's fine. It's part of the process. In my mind, I am learning something new, and that's the cost for learning something new in this particular case. And so they sent me these videos. Let me show you what those 2 videos are, kind of back to back.
We're going to expose the capillary tube. That's the only joint under the foam. You can see where it goes in on your suction line in relation to your drain valve. It's typically somewhere in between here. So as you can see, the cap tube goes into the evaporator right there. highest probability for any leak. There are no other joints inside the machine, so expose this area, put pressure on it, soap and bubble it, and look for
All right, there it is. Easy peasy. I wish they would have sent that to me sooner, but let's go ahead and get into that foamed area. To do that, we're going to have to completely dismantle the drum and take everything apart, which is not a big deal because my freeze dryer is literally in pieces as we speak. Let's remove the foam, test for a leak. You're about to find out what happened.
All right, now I feel like we're getting somewhere, because if this is the most probable place for a leak, then maybe we could fix it. And in my mind, you know, based off of that very quick tutorial, this may be the pipe that I'm looking for. And so if we just open up an area, I don't know, maybe this big, then we can expose, you know, remove the foam and then expose what they call the capillary tube. The capillary tube is that very, very thin tube that you see right there at the bottom going into that black section. And so I'm just going to go ahead and scrape away. And I got to tell you, you know, there's like a piece of cling film or something that's between the foam and those copper pipes. And it made removing the foam actually pretty simple. But there's the capillary tube right there at the bottom. And I don't know really what I'm looking for, but it looks like everything is proper. Like it doesn't look like there's, you know, bad welds or anything right there. And so we went ahead and pressurized the system and charged it up and added a little soapy water. All right, so at this point, we're just checking for suds, because if that's the most probable place, then we're going to get, you know, bubble action right here. I think it is important to note that off camera, the gauge of the pressure over the course of 24 hours did go down like it had before. But notice that capillary tube where it goes into that bigger copper pipe, there is no bubbles that are forming, right? It doesn't look like there's an active leak right there, albeit the system is pressurized.
And there you have it, no leak at that spot. And according to Harvestrite, if there were to be a leak on the low side, hypothetically speaking, it would be right there. And obviously under pressure and with bubbles over an elapsed period of time, there was no leak. So I am still convinced that the leak is on the low side, because remember, we've dunked the high side in water. We left it in there for a long time, 8-9 hours. There was no bubbles, you know, it was under pressure. There was no bubbles coming up. The high side was perfectly fine, no problem there. And so in my mind, there's got to be another place on the low side, somewhere in the drum, that a leak has occurred. So I got on the internet, started to go to different forums, and I learned something very interesting. And like I said earlier, you know, maybe Harvestrite is obligated to say certain things for legal reasons, but forums, Reddit and Quora and forums like that, they don't hold back. People go out there and they talk about their problems. And I learned that there was a growing community who have experienced a very similar thing that we did, and the leak was coming somewhere under the foam. Not from where the capillary tube is, that's what we just checked, somewhere under the foam. Now, the fix is to remove that foam, find the leak, fix it, you know, weld it, and then refoam the unit. Unfortunately, that's something that Harvestrite typically would have to do. And when I presented that information to them, they did not want to confirm that they had issues in the past with leaks coming from inside that area with the foam. And at this point, we're probably 3 months, I would say 3 months into this process, you know, weekly phone calls, bi-weekly phone calls. And the final suggestion that Harvestrite had, matter of fact, they said, hey, this is the absolute best that we could do for you. You have to send the unit back, okay? Send the unit back to us. We'll take a look at it, we'll fix it, and then we'll ship it back to you, okay? Now, before you guys light up the comment section about warranties and customers support and companies standing behind their product and all that really great stuff. And I can't speak for everyone's experience. I can only speak for my experience. And although the process on the phone with their support team was incredibly frustrating, I think that it took way longer than it should have. I thought, you know, in 2 weeks we could have isolated the situation. Knowing what I know now, I certainly would have made, you know, very different decisions. I will say that according to the guidelines of their warranty, they actually went above and beyond, believe it or not. Here's what their warranty says. I'm just going to read it right off their website. This is what I printed up. And it's important for you to know that I fall in a very unique category when it comes to situations like this. I'll tell you about it here in a second. You may already know. Their warranty, according to their website, says full 1-year warranty only includes the U.S. continental 48 states. Okay? It says so from 1 year from original ship date. Harvest-Right will be responsible for repair or, at our option, replace any parts of the freeze dryer and or vacuum pump which proves to be defective in workmanship or material. It says the consumer will be responsible for service call costs. Consumer may also be responsible for replacement parts caused by misuse or neglect of the product. So that's the warranty for people who live in the United States. I can say with almost 100% certainty that if I lived in the continental United States, my issue would have been resolved more than likely 2 months sooner. There's no doubt in my mind. I would have sent the unit back to Harvest-Right and they would have fixed it, and then they would have got it back in my hands and I'd be freeze drying up in no time. But I don't live in the continental United States. I live in Latin America. And so for me, I fall under limited international warranty. And let me read to you what that says. It also includes the Premier oil vacuum pump and the oil-free vacuum pump. And it says Harvest-Right will provide support through telephone and email only. They did that 100%. Albeit not according to the timeline that I would have preferred, but they most certainly did that. At our option, all parts deemed necessary will be provided by Harvest-Right. Okay, so if I would have needed a part, they would have sent a part. Consumer will be responsible for cost of local service and cost of parts for consumer misuse, neglect. Same as before. And then, of course, cost for transportation and delivery of all parts for any reason from Harvest-Right to consumer. All right, so if Harvest-Right needed to send me a part, I'd have to pay for the shipping. If I wanted to send my machine back to Harvest-Right, I was going to have to pay for the shipping. And at that point, that was the option. Send the machine back to us and we will get you all fixed up. The problem is where I live in Latin America, in order for me to ship that particular unit, crated up, back to Harvest-Right, the cheapest, and it was UPS, quote that I was able to get was $2,100 something. $2,100 something. Now, nowhere does it say that Harvest-Right will chip in for that cost. But where I think Harvest-Right went above and beyond is they actually said that they would throw in $500 if I did want to ship the unit back. I thought that was great, but economically it just didn't make sense. Shipping a freeze dryer back, $1,600 is what I would have been out of pocket after it was all said and done. Plus the money I'd already spent. I mean, it would just make more sense to buy another freeze dryer in my mind. And so at that point, we were done with the service calls. Harvest-Right said, if that's the most that we could do for you. And don't get me wrong, I was very grateful. I learned a lot in 3 months. In this entire journey, I feel like I got to know my freeze dryer better. And in a different video where we talk about, what it's like owning a freeze dryer, that's going to be one of my tips, is that if you are going to own a freeze dryer, you really kind of need to understand how it works, even at the most basic level, and then possibly even how to maintenance it. So at this point, I'm on my own. My freeze dryer is not working, and I have got two options the way I see it. Option number one is completely remove all the foam, which is where I think the leak is, from the drum, find the leak, fix it, be done. Or option two, which is a much easier option, looks a little like this.
This is what we're going to be putting into our system. It's called Easy Seal Ultimate for small systems. It's a permanent fix for small leaks, and it's made by a company called New Calgon. And to be completely honest, I actually would rather not use this product. I would have rather found the leak and fixed it. But at this point, I honestly don't want to take all the foam off and all that shenanigans. And so I've got nothing to lose. If it doesn't fix the leak, then I'll resort to plan B. This is what the little pack looks like. And let's go ahead and go into the other room and inject this into the system and see what happens. All right, before we inject that leak stop into the system, we've got to put it all back together. Currently, it's in pieces all over, my room here. And so we're going to go ahead and just re-insulate that with some foam. This is like a great stuff type expanding foam. And I got to tell you, I put way too much right off the bat. But it worked out, so not a big deal. We've got it back on its space. We're now going to reconnect all the pipes, make sure that there's no leaks, and just a little FYI, anytime you open up your system, you definitely want to change out the filter, and that's what this was the old filter that came with the system. We actually added a new one, slightly larger, more premium filter. That's what that is right there in the back. And now that we have the compressor and the condenser, all that put back in place, let me just put the front panel on. And this is actually a really easy system to take apart in the event that you were curious and you have to do any work. We are going to be filling it with the recommended 410A. And this is the leak stop. That's what it looks like. It's that little juice right there in the very center. Not a lot. So maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Right now we're just doing a test for leaks with some sudsy water, and we've got everything connected. So we're basically going to be using the refrigerant to push that leak stop into the system. We've run a vacuum for about 4 hours, and we're now pushing refrigerant through that little tube, and there we go. Bang, it's in the system. All right, done deal. So we've got it charged up. I'm going to go ahead and run the freeze cycle on the function test. Just turn it on and let it kind of do its thing. Now I called NewCalgon and said, hey, how long should I run my system? And they said, really, there's no good answer for that. Longer is better, but you want to at least it run for 1 hour. So I thought, you know what? We'll let it run for 18 hours and then, we'll do a load or something. But this is what it looked like 18 hours later. Don't pay a whole lot of attention to the temperatures up there, because when you unplug the tray inside, those numbers get all goofy and all wacky and things like that. And so those aren't really accurate numbers to look at. But right now it's been running for about 18 hours, and we're going to go ahead and open it up and see what's going on inside. And this is what it looked like inside. So we've got a really nice frost pattern in this drum, but in my opinion, it's still a little short. We've got, I don't know, 1.5 inches, 2 inches on the back side, about 3 inches right here on the front side, and I feel like it should actually come closer to that black seal, when you close the door. And so who knows what happened? Maybe it's undercharged. Maybe a little Freon escaped while it was trying to find the leak. Maybe the leak isn't fixed. Whatever the cause is, I got my HVAC guy back out. We are going to charge it up a little bit more so that we can make sure this is fully charged. And notice that frost pattern right there on the tube. I'm going to bring it all the way down to the compressor. So I don't want it to be on the compressor. I just want it to stop short of the compressor. And that may be a bit too much, but check out that frost pattern. When I got this and it was brand new, it didn't even have that good of a frost pattern. So I'm kind of loving it. Let's remove the seal. And it looks like we only have about 1 inch on the front side that doesn't have a frost pattern. And that makes sense because there's really no copper tubing right there on the end.
All right, guys, the juice is in the system, and we're going to run this unit every day for the next 2 weeks to see whether or not the Easy Seal Ultimate small system leak stop by NewCalgon has fixed the leak. Now, I want to make it crystal clear that I am not endorsing this product in any way. I'm not saying that you should use this particular product if you have a leak. Matter of fact, if your system is still under warranty and you live in the continental United States, your best bet would be to call Harvest Right to find out what their advice would be and then go about having them fix it. But because of where I live, I've got nothing to lose. I did buy this off of Amazon. It did come highly recommended by some HVAC people that I trust and respect. Although I was told that, depending on the leak, depending on the size of it or whatever, that it may not always work. All right. So there's, a 50-50 shot, I guess, that it might work, that it might not work. But like I said, I've got nothing to lose. All right. Now, I'm obviously filming this after the fact. And so about 2 weeks has passed. And we're going to go take a look at what the system has done almost at the end of every cycle so that we can see whether that ice ring has come all the way to the front and has stayed there, or if it slowly starts to recede. If it recedes, that means we still have a leak, and then we've got to move on to plan B, which I'm really not looking forward to, and that's removing all the foam, and in that case, we'll do that in a separate video. But for right now, let's go look at the system and see what's going on.
All right, our first test, look at that, it's been drying for 68 hours and 45 minutes. So this was the first thing that we put in there. I just kind of threw some dinners that we had in the freezer, and I wanted to see what happened. And notice that half of the chamber doesn't have ice and half of the chamber does have ice. So that's not necessarily a good sign in my opinion right now. And this was a regular freeze-dried batch, so it had a freezing cycle, a drying cycle, just like a regular freeze dryer does. I love the apples. We had some apples that were starting to oxidize, and we weren't going to use them for anything. I was making a chicken apple sausage. And check this out. So good. I love freeze-dried apples. Anyway, those came out amazing. Now we can put those to the side, and we have mushroom soup, and there's some chili right here at the top. We've got some tomato basil soup. If you guys want to see videos on how we made all of those and freeze-dried them, let me know in the comment section. Okay, so notice now that the freeze dryer is off and it's in cooling mode, the walls are starting to freeze again. Interesting, isn't it? I don't think I've ever seen something like that happen. All right, so let's shelf that and move on to the 4th day after the fix. I did a quick batch of candy. I think I had Skittles and M&Ms into the freeze dryer. And notice the frost pattern on the wall. It's going from the back all the way to the front. And that's how it should be. So I got to admit, very interesting results. Let's move on to the next one. The following day, we did saltwater taffy. We did some more caramel M&Ms. And check out the frost pattern once again from the back all the way to the front. Once again, that's how it should look. Let's look at the 8th day after the fix. I thought it'd be cool to whip up my dog some dog treats. Now, this was a full freeze-dry cycle. This wasn't candy mode. And, ooh, look at those treats. Little puppies love these treats, by the way. Let me know if you want to know how to make them. Look at the frost pattern on the wall here. It may be hard to see, but the majority of the ice accumulation is at about 50% and to the back, right? All of the frost on the front is relatively new. So during the majority of the drying cycle of this particular batch, it was just bare metal. And all that frost that you see basically halfway in the middle of the drum all the way to the door, that's all frost that's accumulated after the cycle has finished. So when I was done freeze drying, it automatically kicks into kind of like a freezing mode again, and that's when the walls start to freeze up again. So that's why you see that frost there. But to have the ice accumulate at only 50% of the drum, I gotta admit, kind of strange. If you have any ideas as to why it's doing that, leave them in the comment section below. Let's move on. We're now at 10 days after the fix. And we decided to do another candy batch. This is saltwater taffy. So tasty. And check out the frost pattern when we do candy mode, right? So candy mode happens very quick, only a few hours. And check it out. It's from the back of the freeze dryer all the way to the front. Matter of fact, we're probably within an inch of that edge, which is absolutely perfect. So for whatever reason, during candy mode and during regular freezing, the frost pattern comes all the way to the front. But during a regular cycle, you know, if you're running a regular freeze-dry cycle and it takes multiple days, that frost pattern is only happening at 50% and only during the drying stage. Notice that my frost line on my pump is exactly where we left it, right? So we definitely have enough Freon in there. Otherwise, that frost line wouldn't be there. Okay, let's continue. Okay, 13 days after the fix, we did a quick cycle for some green onions. I think the entire process might have taken 24 hours or something like that. And if you notice the frost pattern again, when we ran a full cycle, now it's been in the cooling mode, so all the stuff you see in the front is relatively new. But notice where the majority of the ice buildup is, right? So this is the moisture that's coming off of the food. It should be evenly divided throughout the entire chamber, but if you notice that it's mainly accumulating through the back side. Very interesting. Right here on the front, this is all new. So after the drying cycle ended and it entered refrigeration mode, this front section got all icy. And so that's what happened on this cycle. The last test we're going to do, this is 15 days after the fix. I'm just going to time lapse the freeze cycle for you so that you can see what it's doing. Notice it's coming from the back all the way to the front. Right now we're freeze drying some chicken necks. These are going to be some dog treats. Absolutely amazing. And here we go. We are about an inch to the front. That's where the rubber gasket is, and that's absolutely perfect. All right, so as far as freezing is concerned, it looks like we're not having a problem as of right now, at least 15 days into the process. Let's go ahead and cover this up, finish the cycle, and I'll show you what that looks like right here. But before we do that, let's take a look at the screen after 19 hours of drying. Notice the mTORs. It says about 640. We're actually hovering between 720 and 615, something like that. And in my mind, that's kind of high. That isn't a very good vacuum during the drying cycle. And so that's definitely something that we're going to have to address. We'll probably do it in a different video. But I was told that the quality of your vacuum does affect how those rings form. So that may have something to do, you know, with the ring formation as well. All right, so our chicken necks are done. I want you to take a look at where the ice ring has formed during this, what seemed to be a very long drying cycle. And once again, just like before, on a freeze drying cycle that took multiple days, the ice ring only formed on the back 50% of the drum. I think that this is contributing to the inefficiency of how this chamber is drying. Now, I do want you to notice that in front of that ice ring, it's starting to ice over. These systems are built with no cold control. Basically, the condenser runs constantly. So even though it's no longer drying, the condenser is still running, and new ice rings are forming on that front half. But that back section, I don't know. Super weird. Harvest Right did tell me this wasn't something I needed to worry about too much, but I don't know if I necessarily believe that.
All right, guys, I don't think we can start celebrating yet. Although we've run a batch of food or candy every day for the last 2 weeks in our freeze dryer, and we've maintained a relatively strong ice ring all the way to the front, I don't think we're in the clear. What we're about to do, and the dog treats that we just made, so the freeze-dried chicken necks have just come out. What I think we're going to do is just power down the freeze dryer, and we're going to leave it off for the next, I don't know, 7 to 10 days or something like that. I think that if the unit still has a leak, it might show itself more with the power off. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to leave it off, and then we're going to check the ice ring after about 7 to 10 days. And so this is going to conclude part 1 of our journey on what we've had to do to fix the leak in our Harvest Right freeze dryer. Hopefully this did it. Be sure to stick around for part 2. In part 2, you're either going to be seeing me singing the praise of this product because it would have fixed the leak, or you're going to be watching me remove all the foam from the drum, finding the leak, fixing it, and then putting it all back together. In addition to that, we're also going to be addressing that unique issue that sort of popped up during our long freeze drying cycle, and that's where ice was only accumulating on the back half of the drum. It's not supposed to be like that. And so in part 2, both of those issues are going to be addressed, and hopefully we'll be able to fix them. And after it's all said and done, maybe you'll learn a thing or two about how your freeze dryer works. If you currently own a freeze dryer, or if you are looking to buy a freeze dryer and you're not already subscribed to this channel, hit that subscribe button and that notification bell, not only so you don't miss part 2, but we've got a video coming up that explains everything that you need to know before you make that giant investment, that giant purchase. Freeze dryers aren't cheap, and hopefully the information that I can share with you will help you make a more educated decision. We've also got a video coming up on how to fix your vacuum issues with your Harvest Right freeze dryer. That's right, we've also had vacuum issues in the short time that we've owned our freeze dryer, but this fix is super easy. You don't need a licensed professional, and you can do it with just a wrench and a couple things. We'll talk about it then. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. I feel like I've learned a lot, not only about how to freeze dry, but about how a freeze dryer works. And I feel like I can offer some insight where perhaps maybe a year ago I couldn't. And so if you have a question, leave them in the comment section below. And of course, if you're having a problem, don't hesitate. Call Harvest Right, talk to their support staff. And I know that they could seem incredibly frustrating, trust me. But, give them a shot and hopefully they can help you out. Thanks a lot for watching. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Share it with all your friends who are in the freeze drying community, the forums, Reddit, all that great stuff. And as always, we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.